Hey guys, welcome to the Janus Project. If you haven't done so already, please like this video, subscribe below, and leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know how you've enjoyed Creation Week. It's been the first time that I've put out a piece of content each day for a solid week, and I enjoyed it. I have a full-time job plus otherwise, but I enjoy doing it, and so let me know if you enjoy the content, and let me know if it's been helpful for you. I enjoy doing this material, and so just a little teaser there. We are getting into chapter 7 today, and what happens with chapter 7 is it's entitled Lamarck and his not acquired traits, and so I'll start the chapter off. It says this: by the time Darwin came along, there were and had been many naturalists, what today we might call biologists, who had been paying attention to the similar shapes and functions they observed among plants and animals. Philosophers had been wrestling with the origin of life since the heyday of the ancient Greeks. Almost all had speculated on how life began and how living things became so obviously independent. They observed and documented patterns in nature. Big fish need little fish, squirrels need trees, humans need to eat, and nature provides the groceries. But how did the great variety of living things come to be, and how did we all get here? And so he's expounding on all of this good stuff. And generally, he's talking about this. He says, living things were generally believed to have a soul or a metaphysical quality that passed from parent to child, and even from tree to acorn. In the minds of 19th century naturalists, permanence had been there from the beginning. Change was not built in. Yet, they suspected that a mechanism for change did exist. How could nature or deity cause so many forms to arise or be created? Did the Creator imbue every living seed with a soul? Expressing it in the words of the 19th century, how could what they call homogeneity become heterogeneity? Darwin's descent by natural selection was a result not only of a great step in thought, but also a sidestepping of a great many ideas that missed the mark. And so, again, he's just, like I said, this book is going to be really useful when it gets into kind of the history of evolution. I think it's got some valuable things to say there. And again, he's going to talk about Lamarck and the various ways that genetic information supposedly passed down. And you can read it for yourself. But Lamarck is going to speculate on a few, there's might be these little structures that get passed down and all that good stuff. He says, Lamarck's speculation was a helpful means to gain insight into the ways in which species change. He was grasping to understand the means by which an organism could gain complexity or specificity and efficacy, I'm having a hard time, by which he, she, or it reproduces. For me, the iconic example is the giraffe. Imagine, again, being a Central European thinker and coming up with the giraffe for the first time. Because their unassuming ways and their seemingly amicable outlook on life, giraffes are just fascinating. Inevitably, you would wonder, how did they get those long necks? Why don't we have regular necks like dogs, cats, and cows? After all, we do not observe giraffes actively stretching their own necks as they grow up. They're just born that way. If you cut the tail of a mouse, its offspring still have tails. If a big-shouldered family stops working as a blacksmith, then they still have big shoulders. Lamarck's ideas did not stand up to scientific scrutiny. And so he's just commenting on some of the failed ideas. Now, again, we as creationists, no matter what people believed in the past, we as creationists do not believe that God created all animals exactly as they look today. We believe that he created the different kinds, and I realize the definition of kind is discussable. You can have a discussion on that, but the fact is, scientists can't decide on what a species is either. So I know that's a whataboutism, but if you're going to get on my case for not being able to clearly define a kind, then I'm going to get on your case for not being able to clearly define a species. They are both nebulous terms that we are trying to wrap around something that's living and constantly changing. But the fact is, what we observe is there seems to be some threshold whereby things cannot change outside of this certain box. There's a whole lot of variety inside the box, but there seems to be a limit. And so as we deal with dogs, we have seen a vast array of dogs and species of dogs and all of that created, but there seems to be a border that they can't change outside of that. Same with cats, same with bacteria, same with fruit flies. I referenced it in an earlier video, but this idea of fruit flies where they are constantly experimented on, and they really can only change kind of within a little window. And so that's fruit flies, but they will always be fruit flies. Okay, they don't develop into something else. They are still fruit flies. They have all the essential parts to be a fruit fly. Same thing is true with bacteria. And so they've done tons of experiments on these things, and they do not change outside of a certain window. David Berlinski references that in some of his discussions. Again, it's something that has been observed. And so as we talk about observational versus historical science, the origin of all this, like long ways ago, that's historical. We can't experiment with that anymore. But what we can experiment really does validate the idea that there are borders. Now, again, he goes on and he talks about various things. But the interesting thing to note is that Lamarck, even though he was wrong, he actually did almost touch on some of this idea of epigenetics. Now, I've used the illustration before of epigenetics. It's like a library, and I want you to imagine the DNA of your body being a library. Now, DNA is copied, and then that copy is taken out of the nucleus of your cell. You can't actually pull the DNA is not supposed to leave. And so the DNA is copied, taken out of your cell. And the illustration I've used is, imagine that DNA being a library shelf. So you walk into a library, you want the information on a book, but they don't allow you to take the book out of the library. So you take the book off of the shelf, you copy it, and then you put the book back, and you take the copy out and you do whatever you need to do with it. That's the idea of what DNA does. However, because of this thing called epigenetics, what can actually happen is, because of various environmental things, so droughts, famines, various food groups that your mom may have eaten, things like that, you will find cases where certain library shelves are locked up tight. And so you can't actually get at that genetic information. And when certain environmental things shift, it will actually unlock that cabinet and allow you to access the information there. And so we actually do sometimes have it where, because of some lifestyle choices, it may unlock a new genetic ability for you, which is amazing. Because again, in science, we have what's called a genotype, which is what you look like on a genetic level. And then we have what's called a phenotype, which is what you look like on the physical level. So my genes might actually say some other things about me, but the genes that are activated, so to speak, are the ones you see. And so what's really neat is, because of certain environmental changes and certain dietary things, you can actually activate more genes into your phenotype, so to speak. And so it's just kind of a neat variety here. And so that's, I look at that as more evidence for design, as you understand the mechanisms involved there, and the fact that a creature isn't necessarily going to be able to select for something that might be genetically, hidden away in the recesses. I look at that and say, see, that's even more evidence for design. Because again, these are not traits that nature is going to select, because it does not know what the environmental changes down the road are going to be that will trigger the change.